On October 14th in Royal Oak. Now, will you please join me in welcoming John Hiner again and Governor Rick Snyder.
Thank you and welcome, Governor Snyder. It's great to have you here tonight and join us in Grand Rapids at our fairly new hub. Let's kick it off by asking some general questions about your last term in office, first term. But what do you see as your chief accomplishment so far for the state of Michigan and its residents?
Yeah, well, John, it's great. I appreciate everyone being here because it's a great opportunity to share those thoughts and answer your questions. To begin with, you got to go back in time. We were a broken state. We were 50 out of 50 in how many metrics? If you go back to 2009, we had the highest unemployment in the nation. We had the largest drop in personal income. We had our population declining. We had home values plummeting. And if you look 4 years later, where are we? In terms of nearly 300,000 private sector jobs been created. Personal income was ninth fastest in the country in terms of coming back. They just had a report that said we had the largest increase in home values in the United States over the last 12 months. Our population's growing again. And there's a big list of things we've gotten done. Just to put it in perspective, I'd be happy to leave you a copy. But that's a pretty good list of accomplishments. What I would say, though, rather than just changing a law or regulation, one thing that I'm really proud of is how we're working better together as Michiganders. If you look at it, we've had a number of important initiatives going on around the state where people are showing they're working together. And that was something we broke for too many years, where if it was East Side versus West Side, one community against another community, Detroit versus Michigan, and we've really established it now where it's Detroit, Michigan, we've done the grand bargain, we've done a lot of other things where people are starting to work together, where regions and communities are coming together to work together. And we need to keep that up and we need to accelerate that, so I'm proud of my record.
If you call Michigan the comeback state, if that's the case, why are we still ranked 44th in unemployment? You could cite some of the other factors where we have seen some tangible improvement, but on the employment front, we're still lagging.
Well, if you put it in perspective, we started farther in the hole than anyone. And that's a big part of the message is if you look when I took office, unemployment was over 11%. And we're below 7.5% now. So that's a big change. That's still more than what we'd like, though. The other part is, the good part is we're seeing our labor force grow. That's the other point in the unemployment rate, is we had contracted dramatically in terms of our overall labor force, where people had given up. And we're seeing that expand again, which is a good condition to have, people having confidence or faith to come back in the marketplace again. So that makes it tougher to bring down that rate. So that's why I like to talk about the 300,000 private sector jobs, because they're good, well-paying jobs. In fact, we have over 80,000 openings still. And that's a top priority for a second term, particularly is to help people get career connected and the career tech education track reestablished in our state the way it should be.
Two of the more contentious issues, it's part of the economic agenda, were the tax reforms and right to work. Mm-hmm. And how have we seen tangible results in Michigan and tangible change from enacting those? Yeah,
well, tax reform, in terms of the tax reform where we got rid of the Michigan business tax in particular, is the dumbest tax in the United States, and it's been recognized as such. One of the things, if you go to the Tax Foundation, a nonpartisan nonprofit, I actually received an award for outstanding tax reform in the United States, one of their award winners for getting rid of that dumb tax in partnership with other people. Because one of the questions I like to ask, and I'm wondering, do we have any small business people here? Okay, and if you look around, and those of us that work for a living, I work for a paycheck, which is just as critically important, who really creates most of the jobs in the future? It's small and medium-sized business people, right? I think most of us acknowledge that's where job creation comes from. And the problem we had in Michigan is we had an unfair tax system, where most of these folk are paying the individual income tax. They're flow-through entities, whether it be an S corporation or partnership. So they're paying the Michigan individual income tax. And so what we decided to do in Michigan is we said, let's tax them a whole lot more. And let's tax them in a way where they don't actually know what their tax liability is going to be until they figure it all out. That's not the right answer. That's not how you encourage job creation. So the real point of getting rid of the Michigan business tax is let's have a fair system where these hardworking people that are our primary job creators are paying the same tax rate that you and I pay on our salary and wages. That's the environment we need to create, and that's what we did. So it was about making a fair environment. When people say it was big business getting benefits, they really didn't. Major corporations didn't benefit by the tax reform because I wiped out all their tax credits at the same time for a large business. So they basically broke even, and if you ask the question about tax rates, they pay 6% and individuals pay 4 1/4. I don't know about your math, but 6 is higher than 4 1/4. So I think it was good tax reform to really encourage job creation with small and medium-sized business people to say, let's have a fair tax system. With respect to right to work was standing up for hardworking Michigan people. Originally, I didn't have it on my list of issues. I said it wasn't on my agenda because I said it would be too divisive an issue to have going on in our state. Well, what happened? Well, the environment became divisive, not because of right to work only, but because of Proposition 2 back in 2012. I actually did a meeting with Labor Management Council of Michigan. And in that meeting, I asked them not to go forward with the ballot proposal on Proposal 2, which was about collective bargaining going in our Constitution. It would have destroyed Michigan's economy. Because I said, if you go forward with this, you're going to create that divisive environment where you're going to see collective bargaining, you're going to see right to work, you're going to see all these issues coming up. So please don't move forward. They ignored me. The collective bargaining proposal was resoundingly defeated by 60% or so of the vote. And the environment was such that issues were going on, right to work was on the table, and if you ask me, and I'd always been true to that, right to work was a good thing to do. And why is that? Because it was stepping up for hardworking Michigan workers, the people that work themselves. Shouldn't they have the option to decide? If they see value in a union, I encourage them to join because you see value. But if you don't see value, should you use those hard-earned dollars to do something that you're forced to do, rather than saying, here's a choice? If anything, it should make unions more responsive and accountable to the people they're trying to serve. So I viewed it as stepping up for Michiganders by supporting that. The second thing that happened, which is happening, is we're seeing our business development pipeline of companies looking at Michigan grow significantly. Companies are now looking at Michigan that before just screened us off because we weren't a right-to-work state. We never had a fair shot at getting them here. Now they're looking at Michigan, and we're seeing a big jump in that. Now the natural follow-up question is, well, why don't they say so? Well, stop and think about that for a minute. No one's going to come out and say they're looking at Michigan because of right to work, because they're just asking to get protested. So no one's going to come out and say that, but I can tell you, if you look at the pipeline before and after, it's dramatically increased.
Yeah, you anticipated my next question about right to work, which was, you had stated that it wasn't.
Well, I'm trying to be efficient here. I know you got a lot of questions.
Which, that it not being on your agenda, and then you got into somewhat, to the voter might look like political nuance about why you changed and acted on it. Do you think that creates a credibility gap with voters in Michigan, as that somebody who states something that publicly it's not on your agenda and then it happens?
Well, again, I said why it wasn't on my agenda, because it was a divisive issue, and I wanted to work on other topics and not get involved in all the conflict that you saw happen. But that conflict was already happening with the issue on collective bargaining and everything else. And I'd previously said, if you go back to way back to September 2009, I was asked a question in a public forum, would I support right to work? And I said yes. Beyond that, I didn't see the point of making the point, because again, we were getting a lot done in Michigan, but that's why I asked him not to move forward. The labor movement created the divisive environment, and there's an opportunity to improve Michigan by doing right to work. We got the job done.
Okay. Moving on, if you watch the TV ads, and you can't escape them, it looks like the #1 issue is not education funding, but who's right about how much money went where. But that's been, I think that's been resolved in most of the media.
Resolved, they're lying.
But the largest issue, the larger issue, which persists in Michigan.
No, I mean, just to put it in context, John, it's not like you can have competing claims. It's a math thing, folks. It's a historic number. You just add up the numbers from year to year, and did they go up or down? Again, anything else is smokescreen. The easy answer here is the number went down in the prior administration more than 1 year, and then the time I was governor, in the first 3 years, it went up by over $1 billion in that cumulative period. The budget I just approved is $1 billion higher than the year before I took office. It's simple math.
But to that point, in local school districts, with the end of the pass-through stimulus grants and other factors, many schools are growing class sizes, cutting enrichment options, essential services like transportation or janitorial are being cut. So it begs the question, how much money does the system need in Michigan?
Well, a couple issues come out of that. And again, it varies by district. So again, I'm talking about overall state funding. A number of districts have had decline in enrollment, which means they get less dollars because much of the money is per pupil. So that can be a challenge for districts. And again, I appreciate that's a challenge on how do you reduce your cost structures in a school. It's not easy. The other big one was retirement costs, which is an obligation of the school districts. They're responsible for making a payment to MIPSers, the retirement system, to make sure there's pensions available for school employees. Now, one of the things that's also gone on why we're having all this discussion is the percentage required to put into that system has exploded in the last decade or so. And that's because we didn't properly plan for a long time in the state about paying our retirement cost. It went from roughly in the teens as a percentage of payroll to almost the high 30s as a percentage. So in terms of simply doing a per pupil allocation that would have gotten divided between traditional schools and charter schools, I was concerned about that. And so in fact, a good chunk of the money that we are putting in is we're saying here is money based on what your obligation would otherwise be for pension and retirement. They need to legally decide where they're putting it. Again, we gave them resources, and what we're doing by that is we're actually overweighting traditional public schools at the expense of charters to some degree. We're also making sure those teachers you see in those ads that are saying how bad a guy I am, I'm the guy that actually working hard to make sure they have a retirement that's well funded. That's what this is doing. So these are good things taking place, and the issue is we had to do some catch-up because of, again, all these issues. We've got one more year where we have to make a significant additional investment. After that, it starts leveling off. And I've said this statement, if you look at the long-term liabilities of the state, if we continue to be responsible and make these payments and do it right, it's that comment I've joked to people. If you want to be governor in the state, run in 2038. It's going to be a really cool job because we actually would be paying off our long-term liabilities for our retirement and our post-retiree medical. How many communities, how many elected leaders do you know look at a 50-year horizon and making decisions for the long term, for the future? I'm proud to say we're doing that in Michigan.
The cost of higher education, meanwhile, is making it exclusive for some families. In our voter guide questionnaire, you mentioned supporting dual enrollment as one way to keep the costs down. But what else would you do to reduce the cost of higher education for Michigan families?
Yeah, we need to do more. A couple things. One is we've got great institutions in our state, high quality institutions. I think there is more we can do working with them on their cost structures. I think they've done a lot of good things, but to be open, I don't think they're as fully efficient in terms of measures and benchmarks as they can be. Some are doing very well, but others could use more help. The other one is need-based financial aid. If we have resources, I want to look at it on a need base because, again, let's help the people that have the greatest requirement. When you talk about things, though, this is where we need to have a much more open discussion. One illustration I throw out to people that we often think about, if we had some college students here, I'd ask them, how many people, I see we have a few in the back, I hope, how many of you don't like 8 o'clock classes? Okay, I bet that's 100% market share. How many are happy that quite often you won't have a class on a Friday because they don't offer them? Okay, all those hands basically went up again. Now stop and think about that. Think about when many of us went to school. We did 8 o'clock classes, we did classes on Fridays, all different times, right? Now many of the schools are not scheduling because of sort of demand from the students that they don't do that. Think about that. It doesn't sound like much, but what happens then is you have an underutilized asset, that building, and you have to provide more classrooms. So if you get to some point, you have to build that extra building now because you're not using that one building on Fridays or 8 o'clock. So what do? You go spend $30 million more on a new building. That's not free. Although the young people love that concept, the point is we could help manage our cost structures better, and I think it would be helpful if parents and kids knew that's not a free choice. They're paying it in tuition and everything else and extra costs. So this is the kind of discussion that's a constructive discussion to have. And you did mention dual enrollment. That is a huge opportunity. I was really proud. Last week or so, I got my associate's degree. I really did. I graduated from Kellogg Community College. I'm a proud alumni. And the great part is when I was in Battle Creek, I was talking to them, and they have 1,200 students in dual enrollment. Think about this. If you can get a year of college done while you're still in high school, you've saved 25% on a bachelor's degree, 50% on an associate's degree. That's the best innovation bargain you can get. So that's where we need to keep this dialogue going and do better and better. The other thing I would mention are programs like MAT Squared, which is the Michigan Advanced Technician Training Program. That's one of my most exciting things for career tech education and helping the skilled trades grow, which there are tens of thousands of great jobs. The way that works is you get hired by a company, you alternate going to school, the company pays your tuition cost. After 3 years, you come out with an associate's degree, a certificate, a guaranteed job, and a work commitment for 2 years. It's the German apprenticeship model, modeled for Michigan. We're already doing it in the state. We're adding more schools. We're adding more programs. That's one of the key paths to our future. And those of you from Grand Rapids, this area, you should be proud. You have a rough equivalent that's working well called the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership. So this is the kind of thing we need to be ramping up to get students in the thousands in these programs, because again, they end up with a great job, they're being paid while they're going, they don't have tuition debt. What an outcome.
I'm going to switch gears here. You've had 4 years with a Republican-led legislature. How would you explain the state of Michigan's roads and the failure to come up with a long-term solution for fixing the roads?
Well, it's hard. I mean, again, I've been supporting road funding for 2 years, but you're talking about a revenue increase. That's not a simple topic, and the history is difficult if you look at it. The last time it was done was '97. So this only comes up about every 10 or 20 years, and it's really hard work. It can take 2 or 3 years every time it comes up. And why is that? Because you need to increase revenue. And legislators don't like to vote for that. And so what has happened is I've been calling for it. What really helped me this last year was pothole season. Right? So if you think about it, the citizens started speaking up to say we have to do something about our roads. And we do. It's about creating more jobs. It's about safety, saving lives, all these other things. But I'll ask the audience again, if it's okay, is how many people here either had a blown tire or bent rim or knew somebody? Raise your hand. Yeah, and how much did that cost? Quite often that's in the hundreds of dollars. And what a waste. We should be taking those dollars and saying, let's invest them in the roads to begin with, and that helps offset a good chunk of the cost to say we can have better roads now and not have to pay for blown tires and bent rims. So my goal now is to say, with the election coming up, because the big constraint is, and it wasn't one party or the other, I think we were just short some votes from legislators that were struggling over coming into election season. Let's get through November and make that a priority in lame duck. Because I still believe we can get a solution in before the end of the year for comprehensive road solutions.
Have the bankruptcy proceedings in Detroit gone as you envisioned? And what are the next steps for Detroit, both politically and otherwise?
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at Detroit has gone better than most anyone would have expected. But that was my goal, was to get it done in 18 months. And I'm proud to say we've accomplished something that I don't think many people in Michigan thought possible. If you step back and look at it, this is a process that goes on even before I appointed Kevin to be emergency manager. I tried a consent agreement. I've been trying to partner with Detroit because it is critical to our long-term future in the state. And I'm proud to say I think we've done more in partnership, positive partnership with Detroit in the last 4 years than you can think about in modern history, regardless of what party the governor was from. And we're setting a stage for the long-term resurgence of Detroit. So they should emerge from bankruptcy hopefully in the next month or two in terms of a plan of adjustment getting approved. Midtown and downtown are already booming. And again, we've done multiple projects to help support that. But we're also helping the neighborhoods. That's my concern, is we don't leave the neighborhoods out of Detroit or some of our other urban areas that need assistance. So we're doing a lot of programming there in terms of community ventures to help the structurally employed, pathways to potential by putting caseworkers, just like Kent School Service Network here, putting them in the schools to help people be successful in terms of families. Again, blight removal, so many other projects, microloan programs. So you're really going to see Detroit come back, and I would have given him a big hug if I could have. It was on a stage, but when Warren Buffett said he was ready to invest in Detroit, that was a signal to the rest of the world to say Detroit's coming back strong. So we just need to continue that, and I feel good the mayor coming back into charge with the city council with good oversight.
Does the experience in Detroit make you more likely to look at the emergency manager as a tool or a solution for other communities in Michigan? Well,
we'd already been doing that. Now, most people hopefully don't recognize, but we've had successful exits in multiple cities. We had an emergency manager situation. They exited in Pontiac, they exited in Benton Harbor, they exited in Allen Park recently. That's why I asked for enhancements to this law. The emergency manager law goes back to Governor Blanchard. I wanted to enhance it because they were staying there too long, not finishing the job. Now what we do with an emergency manager, my goal is wait until it's truly emergency, it's objectively decided, there's no subjectivity to deciding it's an emergency or not. You go in, get the job done, and get out. And you put in good oversight to see it sticks. We've done that in 3 cities now. We're seeing it in the process of hopefully getting completed in Detroit soon. That's the kind of progress we should have, but that's not good enough. What I'm working on now, and we're working in partnership with the legislature, is let's do an early warning system, because my goal is let's avoid it so we don't need an emergency manager to begin with. And I think there's much more we can do in terms of consulting advice with the cities and communities to say, here, look at your longer term financial plan. Because again, I mentioned it about how we do 50-year forecasts. Think about this. Unfortunately, elected officials and our system in the public sector is too much geared to looking at one budget year. 2 years, 3 years in some cases, 1 term or 2 terms. That's not how you do good financial management when you're talking about longer term liabilities. We need to be taking a longer term framework of looking out 40 and 50 years and building structurally sound plans in to make sure people get the benefits they deserve, and we've got stability and comfort for long-term growth, and we should not be sticking our kids with these bills.
Should the state end its contract with Aramark, the food service contractor for prisons? And have the incidents with Aramark given you any concerns about privatization of state services in general?
Well, first, I don't talk about privatization. I don't believe that is a general direction to go. What I believe is competitive bidding. And if it's a private party, we should look at it. If it's the public sector, we should look at that. It's not biased one way or another. And with respect to Aramark, I take every contract seriously, but this is a case where it hasn't gone the way it should. And there are issues on both Aramark and the Department of Corrections. But the question I'd have for you is when you get in a relationship with someone, and Aramark's successfully been doing food services in multiple states for a lot of years, when you first get in a relationship with someone, is your first reaction when you first run into a problem to say, get lost? Or should you work in good faith to say, this isn't working right, we should sit down and hash through the issues and see what needs to be done and try to work it out? Well, I did that. I doubled their fine to $200,000. I brought in someone to help oversee it that actually had been a corrections director in other states, let alone being a corrections officer, and said, let's sit down and hash through this and see if we can work it out. And that's where we're at now. So it'd be premature to give you an answer. What I can say is we're bringing people to the table, we're going to solve these problems, and if we don't, we'll take action.
Governor, what do you see as the most pressing social issue in Michigan right now, and what would you propose to do about it, or what have you done?
Well, social issues, what I'd say is I primarily stay focused on the economic issues. Again, there are a lot of social issue topics up there, but many of them are before courts in some fashion. The one I have brought up that I think is a fair item that should be discussed is Elliott Larson. I haven't taken a position on the act itself, but I think it would be something I would appreciate the legislators taking up and having a thoughtful discussion in lame duck or beyond.
Do you believe personally that LGBT people, citizens, should be protected by those kind of protections?
Again, I don't believe in discrimination. And I think it would be good if the legislature had a thoughtful discussion on the topic.
Okay. Our lakes, of course, are our greatest natural asset and vital to both our economy and to the environment here in Michigan. How would you leverage our lakes more for both, for environmental protections and also for perhaps an economic advantage, both setting Michigan apart from other states? Is there anything specifically that's off the table?
Well, again, there's stuff we need to do. When you say off the table, I mean there are some things you don't do. You don't drill underneath the Great Lakes. Again, we have to be careful, very careful. We have an existing pipeline underneath the lakes. So those are major issues that are actively being addressed. You ask a much broader question, so let me answer that, though, to start with. The Great Lakes are one of the great assets of the world. And I believe most Michiganders, we actually feel blessed to have them, but we also have a strong sense of stewardship. That I like to tell people, 4 out of the 5 Great Lakes prefer Michigan. So we sort of need to live to a higher standard, and so I've taken that very seriously. The first couple of years in office, we had so many issues within Michigan, I had to address those. But I had the opportunity, and I became the chair of the Council of Great Lakes Governors, which are the Great Lakes states and the 2 provinces of Canada. And that group had gone dormant largely. They had a staff, but they had not met the principals for 8 years. That's not right. So I convened a major summit on Mackinac Island 2 years ago to bring us back together, to make us an active organization, to be more active on the protection of the Great Lakes. And we've taken steps to do that. We're talking about how we can do more coordination of all our rules to make sure we have the same set of rules. We have the whole issues about water withdrawals that we need to look at. There's a whole series of things we've improved. I'm proud to say Michigan is taking the lead in invasives in terms of managing them, hopefully eliminating or managing them in some more thoughtful fashion. We put close to $5 million or so in the budget this year. That's the first really significant budget allocation by any of the states to deal with invasives. So we're being very proactive. So I think it's something we really do need to take seriously. I'm proud of my leadership on that topic. In terms of economic opportunity, obviously, look at pure Michigan, the tourism we bring to our state. But I think it's going to be more and more a strategic resource that we need to, again, respect but use smartly. And illustrations are, one thing that a lot of people don't know is, you know, the corn industry. We're exporting corn all over the world now, some other crops. And you hear about corn from Iowa and all these other places. Most people don't recognize a lot of the seed corn that grows all that corn is grown in southwestern Michigan. And it's because it requires more water. So here's a case of a strategic asset that we can sort of say we're specializing in because we have that water resource, but we should be doing it in a rechargeable, sustainable fashion, not wasting a resource.
One of the headlines, or when people write opinion pieces about water, they always talk about commercialization. They envision like a large pipeline taking it somewhere. But commercialization of water happens one bottle at a time, too. What's your take on the potential commercialization of water in those fashions?
No, again, that would be a major problem or issue. Again, you have to look at how do you sustain the system. And this is a broader kind of environmental question that in many respects, a lot of good work had been done for a lot of years, but there's been a major evolution in how environmentalism is being thought of, and I hope I'm on the front edge of that. It's about using science effectively. So too often we did conservation based on places. And there are key places we do need to protect. But what we need to do is step back and look at the ecosystem to say how it all interrelates and how the watersheds affect the Great Lakes and how we have to be more thoughtful about saying what's our overall strategy. I'll give you an illustration. When I became governor, we own about over 4 million acres. The state of Michigan owns over 4 million acres of land in the state. So I said, what's our strategy? And my answer back is, we own over 4 million acres. That's not a strategy. So now we're doing a comprehensive strategy to say, how do we do forestry the right way? How do we do other uses? We look at the watershed issues. So this is that comprehensive approach that I want Michigan to be a leader in terms of using an ecosystem approach based on sound science that actually leverages understanding that we're an important user, but we have to do it in a responsible, sustainable fashion.
Governor, you say you value transparency in government, but so far you haven't disclosed who donated to your nerd fund. Why not?
Sure. That was a mistake I made early on, and it was based on good advice. Everything we did was absolutely legal, and it's done in many other places in the country. It's been done in the past in Michigan. We set up a fund to help offset some of the extra costs of government, and we've been open about disclosing what those dollars have been used for. But originally when we did it, is we said we accepted dollars and we wouldn't disclose. So we took those dollars, we used them, we disclosed how the funds were done. That was a mistake in retrospect. So I learned something, because this is my first political office. I don't know about you, we're all human. So I learned something from this to say, prospectively, we've changed it now, so we're going to disclose future donors, but it wouldn't have been fair to have someone give us the money on that condition and then change the rules on them. So it's just something I put up the learning curve to say I'm older and smarter about that. I'm proud of our transparency overall, though. If you look at it in terms of, look at dashboards and scorecards in our state. I encourage you to go see them. Think about this. When I first got elected governor, in my first State of the State address, I got in front of the entire state and said, here's a dashboard of metrics to look at. And we've done metrics now, dashboards for other departments, other areas as I do special messages. We have scorecards, and you can look at all these. And when I first did it, I got criticized by a lot of the political community to say, why in the world would you ever do that? You can be measured now. My answer is, that's a dumb answer. It's like, I want to be able to measure success, and I want people to see how we're doing. So we've been very transparent about putting up metrics and measures and being proactive on that, and I'm proud of that. And so I'm going to continue on that path, and we've gotten support and good grades from like Pergam and other groups have given us A's. In digital technology, we've gotten A's several years in a row for what we're putting up online and how we're doing technology to be open with people.
I know you like a good challenge. This one's going to be hard.
Okay.
We're up against our time. I'm going to see if we can get through 5 questions in 2 minutes. This will be the speed round.
Okay.
Okay? And it's almost not fair. It's diametrically the other way with the subjects. These are big topics. So we'll see if we can distill the answers. Should marijuana be decriminalized in Michigan?
Marijuana, I'm leaving that for the legislature. Again, that's not something that's going to change our economy or create more and better jobs the way I'm focused on.
Okay. I'm sensing a refrain, but on our online voter guide, you didn't answer this question. Do you support legally recognized same-sex marriage?
Again, that's defined in the Michigan Constitution.
Okay.
And that's before the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Do you support legalized abortion?
Again, I'm a pro-life person, but I think there's a balance to what we need to do to respect both sides. So I've signed bills that did some additional things, and I vetoed bills on the topic.
Mm-hmm. Does Proposal A need to be reworked?
That's a backwards question, because you shouldn't start with saying, where's the money going? We need to start talking about how about student growth and student results, and if it gets into the issue of allocation of resources, which it likely would, I would be happy to have that discussion, but I'm not going to just start saying, let's talk about money. I've never done that, and I've stopped that philosophy at the state level. When I became governor, everybody talked about taking money from someone to give it to somebody else. That's wrong. We need to give you efficient, effective, and accountable government, and it should be about what's best for our citizens, and then you reverse engineer to say what are the resources and how do you do it to get the right answer.
If Republicans in the legislature try to repeal prevailing wage, which requires contractors to pay union wages on publicly funded projects, would you sign that bill?
Again, I don't do hypotheticals on bills.
Okay. But you did 5 questions in 2 minutes.
Okay.
So congratulations.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Rick Snyder, thank you for coming.